If your Shopify products aren't selling, you need to do this. So what I'm going to go through is actually a scenario I went through with a client just yesterday. And it's about understanding the fundamentals of where your business is going wrong. Because when we're doing things on our own, when we're doing new things in trying to progress our e-commerce business, it's an absolute minefield. The blessing and the curse of having your own business is there's infinite things you could be doing, opportunity, but there's also infinite things that could be going wrong, to your detriment. And so a lot of people that come into my world, the people that I help scale e-commerce businesses through my Ecom Blueprint and Up-Level Mastermind programs, they just don't know where they're going wrong. And that is completely understandable. As I said, with not much experience or not being able to see, the forest for the trees because they're so much inside their business daily that they can't get clarity with where things are going wrong. So hopefully this will be helpful for you if you're in this scenario where you're like, I'm putting in all this time, all this effort, I've been doing it for, weeks or months or sometimes even years that people, again, come into my world. Then hopefully this will be valuable for you about really what you can do to try and diagnose where things are going wrong so that you can obviously go and rectify it. So this particular person, they sell products online and they're kind of high average order value. So, the average price would be about $1,000. And we've worked with it for quite some time and we've tried different strategies here and there. But it came to a bit of a head where it's like, look, I've been running these ads, in this case on Meta, for a little while, and they're not seeming to get the results. We've tried some optimizations here, we've worked through them and helped them manage content. And of course, there's always improvements that can be made. And that's what we are going to continue to work on. But what we decided to do is actually pull back the budget, or let's call it the reliance of what we were trying to extract from Meta, and push it into other relevant sources with high leverage. And so the process number one is to analyze everything that you've done and make sure you've given it an appropriate amount of time. And so this is where we encourage people, or it's actually mandatory within our program, to track progress daily. Because with data, we can see what we've actually done and what has been impacted, meaning our cause and our effect. It's not our actual opinion or thoughts or feelings that we're relying on because they are unreliable. It's our numbers and our data that will tell us the story. So that's the first challenge that people have, is they just don't know what's going on because they don't have visuals over it. The second part to that is that they don't give things long enough to come to fruition, or enough testing to say, okay, yep, this is working, or no, this isn't working. Okay, so that's the first thing in terms of understanding it. So what we did was we mapped out everything that they've done, or rather understood everything that they have done, and to what degree and for how long. And we're able to say, okay, that has been given enough period of time, or no, that hasn't been given enough period of time. This is what we need to do in either scenario. The second part to our analysis was looking at essentially the effectiveness of each one of those activities, right? I kind of just briefly mentioned that, but one is objectively looking at the data. The second is, well, are we actually getting impact from what you're doing here? We all have a limited amount of time, energy, finances, but just generally resources in our day-to-day. Again, one of the biggest challenges of ecom brand founders is doing everything ourselves. It's a reality though, until we get to a certain stage where we can outsource or hire contractors or employ people to go and do it. So we have to work through our realities. And so leverage then becomes really, really important. And something as you continue to grow as well, leverage is super, super important. So we analyze those, I'd say half dozen things from a marketing perspective that they were doing. And then of course we took a look at performance of, website, for example, and product performance, which is a little bit more kind of in depth, and see what's happening when traffic is actually being driven. So we refer back to our Magic 3 here. If you're not familiar with the Magic 3, it's something that my program is based upon, and anything to do with driving revenue and sales with online business is to do with one of these three things. The first one is traffic. The second one is conversions of that traffic. And the third one is lifetime value. So extracting more revenue from your customers or your audience over the lifetime of them or your business. Okay. So we looked at the marketing, we looked at the traffic side of things. And we determined that meta ads was being really, really inefficient. With the changes that have been made, with the cost of driving traffic, it was inefficient. Now, there also was a bit of a conversions challenge. And again, this is sort of some allowance or impact versus the product type, and also the average order value being, over $1,000 in this case, which is higher than, say, your average e-commerce business that's, sits around that 80 to 100. So there's some factors and some considerations there, but I could pull through my 13 years experience and say, okay, this is acceptable. We need a bit more time on this, or no, this is not acceptable. We need to go and change something. So we basically said, right, you're getting no leverage from your meta ads. Retargeting, yes, leave that on. Leave a let's call it a skeleton campaign for our top of funnel, meaning our cold audience coming through. But you're getting much more leverage from Google ads over here. So you need to pour your resources over there and let it do its thing. I think they were, converting like a 3x on Google and absolutely hardly anything on Meta. Now, there is a cause and effect there as well. Like if we pull back from Meta, it may also impact on Google, but given the time period that they've been spending on Meta and the unprofitability with that side, it's a price we're willing to pay or experiment with by pushing more resources at that. And that's why we don't really want to turn off Meta completely. We want to have the skeleton there, but really optimize the spend, because honestly, they were bleeding cash on the Meta platform. So that's what we did from an ads perspective. The second thing that I realized through, speaking with this client was they weren't utilizing their email database. Okay, so they had some past customers that had customers for a number of years, but they weren't doing anything to communicate with them, and they weren't doing anything to actually build their database and build credibility within their marketplace. So something that's selling for over $1,000 needs consideration, needs education, needs authority and trust. And they were doing none of that. So their acquisition strategy, their sales strategy was, hey, I hope someone sees me on social media or on Google because they're looking for this product, and I hope that the website does its job to convince them. That's essentially it, which is extremely flimsy when it comes to a strategy. So they had no email marketing in existence, which is, again, really risky. We're relying on cold audience and also just pure ad spend, which is, again, really, really risky. So that's the second thing we said. You need to bolster that up. You need to continue to communicate consistently to your past customers and also people that are joining your database, because you are going to focus on continuing to build that as well, to build authority, to build trust, to build authenticity, to build confidence in your brand and your products. That's what's required across the board for brands these days, but certainly when you're spending $1,000 plus on this particular product. So that really rang true with this particular client. And they said, yeah, I totally get that. I completely understand that, because we don't expect 100% of people that see us to go and buy. 100% conversion rate is not possible. Let's just say that. A reasonable conversion rate is at 2 to 3%. And even with higher average order value products, it's probably a little bit less than that. And that's okay as long as you're profitable, right? So meaning that in this case, they might have a conversion rate of, let's call it 1% for that high average order value, which means that 99% of people that see them, engage with them, don't buy right there and then. But someone will buy, or is likely to buy if they're in your ecosystem, tomorrow, next week, next month, sometimes next year. But we must be providing the information to them, the trust building, the reminders, the impressions served through our marketing to get them to that point. If they see us once, then never see us again, how are they going to ever be reminded to buy from us? They're just not. So we can't expect that. It's unrealistic. So that was a major pillar that was missing from their business in terms of communication and reaffirmation about why you're in our world. And then, of course, the building of the database too, about giving people incentives to join your list. It might be obviously discounts, or it could be, informational, meaning like lead magnets or something along those lines, okay? So that was a really big pillar that was missing. The second thing we said, well, where are your other sales coming from apart from really Google, to be honest, in this case? They said referrals and word of mouth. Right? Referral organizations, again, trust building. And this is kind of emphasizing what I, have just explained, but was explained to them and said, that makes complete sense. People want to trust an organization or a business or a product with this particular product. And so organizations, and let's call it customer word of mouth, I'll put those in both categories. We need to focus there and leverage that. Okay. We need to provide incentives with that. We need to go harder on our outreach of these two things, because they already trust us. They already like us. They've already either bought from us or referred successfully to us, and people have had good experiences. And so this became our marketing strategy. We said emphasis or shift over to Google Ads from Meta, but keep the lights on Meta. We need to leverage our email database, which isn't in existence right now, okay, and get that communication going constantly. And then we need to be actively reaching out to past customers or people within our world, and also referral partners. And I know that that's a little bit, counterintuitive with an online business, but honestly, my methodology from starting several businesses, successful businesses, is by any means necessary. We cannot be too big to do the little things, what we think are the little things. This is our livelihood. For a lot of us, this is our business, and this one thing over here that might seem manual and long-winded is going to feed the others. The reality too of what I mentioned about even just the referral partners perspective is, I said to him, look, you need 5 successful referrers. Is that possible? He's like, oh yeah, I could do that easily. I said, great. You just need 1 to 2 to 3 people being referred to you per month, and you've basically tripled your sales of what you're currently doing, in amongst everything else that's going on our retail or advertising side. And so when that was in perspective in terms of the cash flow, the profit, and the opportunity with that, it was clear with what needed to be done, versus fumbling around and second guessing and just being unsure and saying this thing's not working. It gave him absolute clarity with what he needs to do. And so this is the second part that I'm talking about. One is to actually be tracking everything that we've done, have records of that, the cause and the effect. The second thing is to say, okay, great, what is happening with that? Where's my highest leverage activities? And the third part, as I've just emphasized with this explanation, is what the hell do we need to go and focus on now? And cut everything else. It shouldn't be more than 2 to 3 things. If it's more than that, it's not a priority, because you're going to have your 1, 2, and some likely 3, like I've mentioned with the client. But if it's any more of that, it's just there's too much stuff going on. You're going to get overwhelmed and stuck in the same cycle that you're stuck in. So I just wanted to share all this with you, because we need to think about those heavy hitters, those high leverage activities when we've got scarce resources being ourselves. And if you can understand that, if you can take stock, and if you're particularly stuck in, a rut, and as this person had been for a little while, then you need to take that step back. You need to see things objectively, unemotionally, and understand that this has been done before, right? People have solved these problems before. Your business or your type of business or your type of product is probably making millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars for someone else right now. And you have this opportunity. And so I just wanted to share that with you, because I shared this with the client that I spoke with yesterday, and it was really empowering for them. They are full of confidence, full of motivation. Now it's about consistency with what we had laid out in our plan. That's what's going to be the magic to this all. The strategies are simple, the clarity is important, but then it's going to be consistency with what we're doing. Okay. So look, I hope this is valuable for you. If you've been struggling to make sales with the Shopify store, track it, diagnose it, and then obviously create an action plan that's absolutely concise and clear, and have consistency with your efforts. So look, hope this was valuable. If it was, love a like, love a subscribe. If you want to know more about how we help ecom brands, you can click on the link below. But other than that, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.